Happy day. My name is Jenna Paul, clinical nutritionist, and I am going to have a bit of a chat today about calcium-rich foods. So dairy is a highly problematic food for a lot of people. It's a very common food intolerance, and there's a couple of reasons for that, mainly to do with the way that it's been processed. So due to regulations in Australia, dairy needs to be pasteurized, and most of it is also homogenized. So pasteurization means that the product or the milk has been heated to a really, really high temperature in order to kill certain bacteria. Now, what also happens during pasteurization is that the lactulose content, which is a sugar, goes up in the dairy. Now, lactulose can actually be isolated and encapsulated and given to people who are constipated to be used as a diuretic in order to do a poo. So, it can help with that. So just keep that in mind. Homogenization means that you spin the milk to really, really quickly and it kind of blends all the fat globules in. That's in a non-scientific way. That's what happens. So through this process, what happens is that the calcium structure within the dairy actually changes and it becomes less bioavailable to the body. Now that means that the body is less able to absorb it. So everything in the body works like a lock and a key. And if you're looking at calcium and a calcium receptor, which is the lock, it should fit in quite nicely so that the body can receive it and utilize it. What happens during the processing methods with dairy is that structure actually changes slightly, so it doesn't fit as well into that receptor. So you're not absorbing as much calcium. Dairy is a very rich source of calcium. That does not mean that your body can absorb it. So it's the same thing when we're talking about should I eat lactose-free milk? Now, what happens with lactose-free milk is typically there is an enzyme, lactase, that is put into the milk so that it partially digests the lactose, typically reducing symptoms of lactose intolerance. But what if you're not sensitive to the lactose? What if you're sensitive to the another part of the product, a different casein? That's what I'm thinking of, casein, which is a protein in there. So just because it's lactose free does not mean it will be less problematic to the body. Typically, if you have a dairy intolerance, I see bloating, indigestion, cramping, urgency to do a poo, loose bowels, congestion, sinus issues, acne, eczema, dermatitis. These are all really typical signs and symptoms that you can have a dairy intolerance. So this is why we might experiment with a dairy-free diet. Now, when you, of course, are pulling out that dairy, one of the most common questions is, well, where am I going to get my calcium from? And there are so many forms, like different foods that you can get it from that have no dairy in them. So big ones are fish, particularly with the bones in them. So if you think about where calcium is stored, which is in your bones, eat that food. So typically fish that's canned, which I'm not a massive fan of, but you can get some salmon with the salmon bones that are edible. That will be really rich in calcium. Otherwise, fishes as well. Broth, because you're boiling those bones and extracting all the nutrients from them into the liquid. So bone broth is also a really good form of calcium, or a really good source of calcium. Eggs, typically as well. Chia seeds, almonds, kale, celery, herbs like parsley, lots of dark green vegetables like your broccoli is really rich in calcium as well. Watercress, spinach, coconut products, and tahini, which is a sesame seed paste. I think the one that's most favorable for a lot of people is sardines. Kidding. But sardines are very rich. So if you have sardines once or twice a week, that should do you quota. And they're also, if you get them fresh, they taste better. But there you have it. There's some really good sources of calcium. If you do suspect that you have a food intolerance and you would like some assistance with that, book in a consultation at jennapool.com/bookings, and we can give you a more individual approach and really look at not only how to assess that food intolerance, but how to heal your body through that process so that you feel good after, and potentially reintroduce it to the point where you can really challenge the body and see how it's responding. Yes, that's it. I hope you have a happy day, and I'll talk to you soon.